Cambridge.
Are you ready? Go!
And so the 132nd University boat race is on its way to Mortlake. Cambridge on the Middlesex station. Oxford have the Surrey bend in their advantage, but Cambridge now have to try to get a lead round this early Middlesex bend, the bend that's in their favour at the start. John Pritchard the stroke. And Cambridge have a slight lead at this point. They come past the boathouses now. Cambridge seem to be veering across towards the Surrey station.
Cambridge.
Mike Sweeney ordering Cambridge to move back. A quarter of a length as they pass the boathouses in Cambridge's favour. Here's the Cambridge crew as we look along the boat. John Pritchard is stroke behind him. Gibson the Canadian. Cambridge up by nearly half a length as they leave the boathouses and approach the Fulham football ground. The bend in Cambridge's favour, and they're going
Cambridge.
up. Cambridge again veering towards the Surrey station. And
Cambridge.
the blades of the two crews coming very close together indeed. Cambridge are clearly trying to force Oxford out of the water.
Cambridge are trying to push Oxford wide on the bend so they can maximise their advantage on this Fulham bend. It's essential to them that they get as clear of Oxford as they can to take the water if they possibly can as they come towards Hammersmith Bridge. Cambridge left the state boats at 42 and dropped rapidly into their stride at 34. Oxford, in fact, overrated them and have been at 36 and are still overrating them. They're taking 2 strokes a minute more than Oxford. Sorry, 2 strokes more than Cambridge.
It looks as though Cambridge may well have forced Oxford out of the best of the tide. And Cambridge get another warning from Mike Sweeney about the steering.
Okay, not too close. The voice is good.
Both crews are now keeping to station, and Oxford are holding on as hard as they can to Cambridge, who now have close on a length.
Okay, that's fine, Bobby, that's good.
And Cambridge steering very wide indeed out on this early part of the race. Well over towards the Surrey station and moving further over by the look of it.
Cambridge fighting hard to get clear water. Normally in the boat race, once you have half a length of clear water, that's held to be good enough to go ahead of the crew behind you. You can then start to take their water, and that's something Cambridge need to do very much before they get to Hammersmith Bridge.
So John Pritchard, desperate to win a boat race before he leaves the university, stroking his crew now to a good lead, his eyes on Oxford. Can this crew, who have said that they've trained for endurance, will they be able to keep the distance they have between themselves and Oxford?
Viewers may remember that last year Cambridge went out to a rapid lead on the Surrey station, and now we can see that Cambridge are actually going further away, and they're still underrating Oxford. They're taking 1.5 to 2 strokes a minute less, which suggests that they're actually rowing rather more easily than Oxford are. We're looking now to see where they will be as they come towards Hammersmith Bridge.
They just about reached the mile. Halfway between the two reservoirs that you saw a moment ago is roughly a mile. There we are. The dividing line between those reservoirs is near enough the mile post. And we have the times at the mile. Cambridge have reached the mile in 3:39 and Oxford in 3:44. And that is only a few seconds outside the times last year. Cambridge are in fact 3 seconds slower at the mile than Oxford were last year.
Cambridge are now showing up 5 seconds in front. That will give them more than enough room to slide in front of Oxford as they come towards Hammersmith Bridge. They've got to maintain this lead, and Oxford have got to do all they can to shorten it. If they can't, if Oxford can't draw back on Cambridge, Cambridge will cut underneath the bank and take the calm water.
So in the early stages of this boat race, Cambridge set fair now to break the long sequence of Oxford winds. They have the clear water, and it means that they can take the Oxford station round the Surrey bend.
One interesting factor about this race is that John Pritchard, who is a very experienced oarsman indeed, is the only man in the stern who has experience. He has all the experience that is necessary to direct his cox to put her in the right place in the river. But neither the Oxford cox nor the Oxford stroke has this experience.
And they are looking at Pritchard now. And these must be glorious moments for him, if only his crew and himself can keep it going.
Cambridge are now striking 33 strokes a minute, and they're 2 below Oxford. They're moving comfortably ahead and working well within their stride. This is how we've seen them in practice. What we didn't know is how they'd hold up under pressure.
And Hammersmith Bridge looms ahead of them now. Hammersmith Bridge is about 1.75 miles up the course. And there's a very substantial lead now obtained by Cambridge, who now can take whatever sheltered water there is and also have the advantage of being able to take the Surrey station.
This is psychologically a very difficult time for Oxford. They may have to prepare to settle behind Cambridge through the rough water and then try and come out and challenge them, but they'll have to challenge them on the Surrey station around the last bend, which will be a difficult task. We're seeing the bow pair of the Cambridge crew rowing smoothly. It's very easy when you're comfortably in front like this. The world feels that it's all running your way. The question is, will it stay that way for the next 10 minutes?
No sign of any problems at all in the Cambridge crew at the moment as they shoot Hammersmith Bridge. Look at that cloud in the background.
I think it's probably, the crews are probably lucky that they can't see the weather that's approaching them.
And there must be now almost 2 lengths of clear water between the two crews. So it looks as though Cambridge are going to end the sequence of Oxford wins, barring disasters. And Cambridge have reached Hammersmith Bridge in 6 minutes 34 seconds, and they are 7 seconds at that point ahead.
Not too close
of
to
Oxford.
them.
7 seconds represents a 2-length lead, and they've now got to hold on to that as they row round this bend, and we'll be looking to see what sort of water they're going to face as they come through after the next minute.
They're 9 seconds outside the Hammersmith Bridge time of last year. It was a very fast race last year, the 3rd fastest in history, and they're only 9 seconds outside that in not nearly such good conditions today. Now they're reaching the point at which the wind, which incidentally has dropped a little since they started, this is the point at which the wind meets the tide. So if we're going to have rough conditions, they are now approaching the section of this race where they'll find it. And a substantial gap opened up between these two crews, and it may well be that Oxford are losing hard.
When the weather gets as difficult as this, the skill factor of the crews comes into play in a big way. Rowing in rough water is in some ways less demanding on the physique from a breathing point of view, but it's extremely difficult technically. The oars which the oarsmen are using have only got about 6 inches between themselves and the water, and so if you get 6-inch waves, they're potentially in all sorts of difficulties.
This Cambridge crew performing immaculately at this point.
Both the universities this year have faced a problem with absorbing foreign oarsmen, or Americans and Canadians in the case of both universities, into their crews, and that has led to difficulties with bringing the styles together. It was thought in training that Cambridge were having more difficulty than Oxford, but certainly at the moment they're showing greater homogeneity, and the crew is moving well as a unit at this point. And we'll be interested to see how they hold together round the corner and into this rough wind.
I think you can see for yourself now that the water is certainly more turbulent at this point than we saw it earlier. Cambridge now, of course, in this happy position of seeing the other crew pacing themselves, able to pace themselves now to the other crew's efforts. If the spurt is made by Oxford, Cambridge, Pritchard in particular, the stroke, is in a position to match it.
Now you can see the water flying off the blades as they pour through the water.
Quite choppy at this point.
Cambridge now have taken the Surrey station from Oxford. They're sitting well in front and over onto the Surrey station.
The nearer they are to that bank, Chris, the more shelter they get.
Yes, they're looking for the calmest water. There's some interesting technical differences between the crews this year. You can see that this Cambridge crew tends to sit well back, lean back into the wind. The style well seated to headwind rowing, and they've got quite a lot in the middle of this race. As you can see them leaning back into it, trying to lever that boat into the wind.
And as they do so we look at Oxford, who are making rather heavy weather of it. You only have to look at their faces to see how grim the struggle is turning out to be. Matt Thomas with the spectacles, their stroke, trying to get this big crew working together to try to get something back. And they are a pretty big crew, 14 stone 3 average, the third heaviest ever crew in the race, but being at this moment outrowed.
Certainly into a headwind, the weight can be an advantage, and traditionally the heaviest crew has won the boat race more often than not. But it is a question of using the weight correctly, and on this occasion Cambridge are applying theirs much better than Oxford are.
It's interesting, Chris, that Oxford happened in fact come over behind Cambridge. They're further out into the river.
Well, I think at this point they've taken a gamble that they want to make the very best of the tide, and they hope that that will help them, and they'll take the risk of being able to row in the rough water.
The Chiswick steps time for Cambridge, 10 minutes and 44 seconds, and gradually they're losing ground on last year's timings. 18 seconds now behind Oxford's time to Chiswick steps last year. 10:44 for Cambridge, and Oxford have reached Chiswick steps in 10:58, 14 seconds adrift.
They're moving out now to over 4-length lead, pushing out towards 5, and it looks now as Cambridge come round the worst of the Surrey bend and onto the Middlesex bend, which favours them, that they've got a clean way home.
Well, what moments these must be for all Cambridge supporters who've waited a long, long time for a Cambridge win, and it's beginning to look as though we're going to see it this year.
At this point, I think the Cambridge people must feel they're almost floating on air, and yet they're terribly frightened that something could go wrong. There is still a long way to go before the end, and even if you're this far in front, you can't afford to put a fortune, or in this case, an all wrong.
Cambridge last won in 1975, 3 3/4 length win in 19 minutes and 27 seconds. And His Royal Highness Prince Edward following the race, and there he is in the cap in the middle. Now let's run through the Cambridge boat as we look at them. Bowman is Ian Clarke, 2 Mark Wilson, 3 David Hughes, 4 James Pugh, 5 Stephen Peel, 6 Paddy Broughton, 7 the Canadian Pick Gibson, and the stroke man is John Pritchard with the moustache. Carol Burton costing Cambridge to what seems to be a fairly substantial victory, unless something quite dramatic and unexpected happens.
Certainly Cambridge making the very best of their water and rowing nicely now. I'm often asked how hard physically is it actually to row in the boat race, and it's extremely hard to explain because of the pressures and the tensions of the race. But viewers might like to think about lifting a sack of potatoes weighing 56 odd pounds from their feet to their necks 34 times a minute for 18 minutes, and you get somewhere near the physical load that is imposed on these athletes. They are trained very hard and very long, but for a good purpose. This is a very tough race indeed.
So, home is coming in sight for us from the helicopter. They won't see it, of course, but here's Barnes Bridge, which is about 3 3/4 miles. So not far from home, and again they have to shoot the central span. And Cambridge now a long, long way ahead and rowing smoothly with its elegant style, which is paying such tremendous dividends in this 137th boat race.
Last year, Cambridge were very concerned when they reviewed their tactics for the year that their crew had been unable to maintain its full strength and power through the length of the course. And this year, this was one thing they were determined to put right, and as we can see, they've done it most effectively.
And Cambridge time at Barnes Bridge, 14:48. So it's not by any means going to be a fast race, but then nobody expected it would be in these conditions. And Oxford's time to Barnes Bridge is 15 minutes and 7 seconds. So they're now 19 seconds behind Cambridge, and they're losing distance all the way up the course.
Cambridge certainly can smell victory now, and they'll be going to push it out to the biggest margin they can manage. They've got 10 years to make up for, and they'll be going for it all the way now. Both crews are rating much the same at the moment. They're both about 32. But as they come towards the brewery, I suspect we'll see Cambridge trying to wind it up to open that gap up.
Well, there's no way this Oxford crew will concede defeat easily, and they still struggle to try to retrieve something from this race, which is going to deny them the chance of taking the Ladbroke Trophy outright. And we're certainly going to see the biggest margin of win, it seems, for some years. 1981, Oxford won by 8 lengths, and there's been nothing like that since. The last few years, the margin was between varied from 3.5 to 4.5 or so.
I think even Cambridge supporters will be surprised by the size of this victory. Most people were hoping for a victory, but I don't think many hoped it would be. Most people thought it might be within 10 seconds, but not much more.
So now we reach the closing stages of this boat race as Cambridge, with their opponents always in sight, rowing steadily and easily all the way in these difficult conditions. Wonderful performance by Cambridge, which is going to lift morale at the university and is going to do the boat race a great deal of good. Look at the crowds behind on the bank there, waving Cambridge home. Memorable boat race.
And here we see a crew on the crest of the wave. They're coming in towards the claim of the crowd. A marvellous moment for that crew. They've worked very hard for it. Any Cambridge crews have worked hard for it, but this is the crew which has finally found success.
A point that could say you had something to do with coaching game. So, marvellous moment for Cambridge. And the long sequence of Oxford wins is about to come to an end. Sad for Oxford, but my word, the jubilation in Cambridge tonight will be really something. You can hear the applause as Cambridge approach the finish with a very impressive margin. They've won it, and they've won it by a long way, and they've won it deservedly. Up go the arms, celebrating victory. They haven't seen it since 1975. Don't let's forget Oxford as they finish. Over the line go Oxford. Beaten by some considerable margin, we'll get it shortly. The Cambridge winning time is 17 minutes and 58 seconds, which in these conditions, I suggest, is by no means a bad time.
Not bad at all. They had very difficult conditions throughout the second half of the course. The final distance appears to be about 21 seconds.
Here comes the official time for Oxford, 18 minutes and 19 seconds. So, absolutely right, 21 seconds is the distance between them, the time between them. Well, always, of course, there's a vast difference between the losers and the winners. You're looking, naturally enough, at the losers, heads down, despair, all that work has come to naught, and they haven't achieved what they wanted. The 11th successive win, and Andy Green, the cock, expresses it for all of them. On Pritchard is our man, Gerald Sinsky.
John, many congratulations. You've been through it all before. How did this one compare with previous ones?
This was, I mean, you never get a perfect row, but that was as close to it as I could have hoped for in these conditions. It's a very difficult race. The conditions are difficult again, but we managed to pull through very well.
You've had bad conditions earlier in the week, which perhaps were even worse. Did that make it seem a little bit easier today?
Well, we positively went out and searched for the bad conditions. Neil Campbell, our coach, always says that whatever station you get, whatever the conditions are, those are the conditions you want, because that's what we got. And he's been a tremendous input. Alan Innes and Neil Campbell have done a tremendous job picking us up from what you can see as the hellboat.
And the fact that you lost the toss obviously didn't have any influence in the end.
Well, there's an old quote from W.D. Grace who said, in cricket, when you win the toss, you bat. If you're unsure, you think about it, then you bat. And if you're still unsure, you consult the senior professional, then you bat. And so Oxford did that, but we pulled through them.
And they kept you waiting at the start, too.
Yeah, that was, we again intended to get there, get on the gate and sit there, not look at them and let them come to us, which is what we've done.